Picture this. The star football player, handsome, strong, and adored by everyone, falling head over heels for the last person anyone would expect. A nerdy, socially awkward sports reporter who knows more about the science of football than the game itself. What happens when a jock and a nerd collide? A love story filled with awkward moments, surprising chemistry, and a touchdown of laughs. This is the unexpected romance of Rye Rocket Andrews and Theo Bennett. Two very different worlds, but maybe, just maybe, a perfect match. Tackling love. Ryan Rocket Andrews was used to being the star of the Springfield Hornets. The crowd cheered when he threw the perfect spiral, his muscles flexing as the ball soared across the field. 6'2", with a jawline that could cut glass. He had it all, the looks, the talent, the attention. But despite all his success, there was one thing Ryan couldn't shake: his growing curiosity about the nerdy new sports reporter who had recently been covering the team. Theo Bennett wasn't your typical reporter. Instead of flashy suits or slick hair, he wore glasses so thick they looked like they belonged to a mad scientist, and his wardrobe usually consisted of polos and khakis. He was always fumbling with his notebook or typing furiously on his laptop, rattling off facts about football that most people wouldn't even understand. And when he got nervous, which happened frequently, his face turned the shade of a tomato, making it impossible to ignore. The first time Ryan noticed Theo was at a press conference after a big win. Theo had stood up to ask a question, and in his nervousness, he knocked over a bottle of water, soaking himself in the process. The whole room gasped. Theo froze, staring at his wet lap, mortified. Ryan couldn't help but grin. "Don't worry, man. Happens to the best of us." Theo's face turned even redder as he tried to salvage his dignity, but Ryan was already on it. "Just don't spill water on me next time," he added, making the room burst into laughter. It was a simple joke, but it made Theo laugh too, even though he was embarrassed. Ryan had made an impression. After that moment, something inside Ryan shifted. He found himself looking forward to the press conferences, hoping to see Theo's awkward but endearing presence. He started to pay attention to the way Theo talked about the game. He was fascinated by the way Theo could talk about football from a physics standpoint, how the angle of the throw could change everything, how the force of a tackle impacted the players' bodies. Ryan had always been a jock, the guy who threw the ball and made touchdowns, but Theo made him see the game in a new light. One night, after practice session, Ryan made up his mind. He spotted Theo sitting alone at a table in the corner of a local bar, scribbling notes into his notepad, completely unaware of the world around him. Without hesitation, Ryan walked over and sat down beside him. "Hey, Theo," Ryan said with a grin. "Mind if I join you?" Theo looked up in surprise, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Oh, sure," he stammered. "But, I don't have anything to drink." Ryan gave him a playful look. "Don't worry about it. I'll get you a soda." Theo opened his mouth to protest, but before he could say anything, Ryan had already waved down the bartender and ordered a round of drinks. "So what's the deal with you in football stats?" Ryan asked, leaning back in his chair, genuinely interested. "You're always rattling off these equations about throwing spirals and force angles. You really into all that?" Theo blinked a few times, caught off guard by the question. Well, yeah. I think it's fascinating how the body moves and how physics impacts the game. Like, if you throw a perfect spiral, it's not just about arm strength. It's about wrist angle, elbow placement, and..." Ryan held up a hand, chuckling. "I don't need a whole physics lecture. I just want to know if it's something you've always been into." Theo paused, and for a moment, Ryan thought maybe he'd gone too far. But then Theo's face lit up, his nervousness melting away as he realized that Ryan wasn't making fun of him. "I've always been fascinated by it," Theo said, his voice gaining confidence. "I mean, football isn't just a game of strength. It's a game of strategy, science, and precision. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that people don't see." Ryan grinned, leaning closer. "You're kind of a nerd, huh?" Theo looked at him, surprised. "Excuse me?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I mean that in the best way possible. You're like the football equivalent of a mad scientist. And I gotta admit, it's kinda cool." Theo blinked. try to process the compliment. Ryan, the football star, calling him cool? It didn't compute. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized Ryan wasn't joking. There was something about the way Ryan looked at him, like he wasn't just the awkward, nerdy reporter, but someone interesting. The night went on, and they talked more about football than either of them had expected. Theo explained the mechanics of a perfect throw, and Ryan listened intently, asking questions and nodding as if he were getting advice from a coach. The whole time, Ryan couldn't help but notice how Theo's face lit up when he was talking about something he loved. For Theo, it was a surreal experience. Here was Ryan Andrews, the star quarterback everyone adored, sitting across from him like an eager student. It made him feel like maybe, just maybe, there was more to this whole football thing than stats and nerdy facts. Weeks went by, and Ryan found himself seeking out Theo more and more. After practice, he'd stop by the press box just to chat. He didn't care about the game stats or how many touchdowns he'd thrown. He cared about the way Theo's eyes sparkled when he spoke, how they shared goofy little jokes, how Theo could explain complex concepts without ever making Ryan feel stupid. One night, after an exhausting championship game, Ryan couldn't take it anymore. He was supposed to be celebrating with his teammates, but instead, he was pacing near the press box, waiting for Theo. He didn't care about the trophy or the cheers from the crowd. He only wanted to tell Theo how he felt. As Theo was packing up his things, Ryan walked up to him, feeling a little nervous but determined. "Hey, Theo," Ryan said, his voice a little shakier than he expected. "You know, I don't know the first thing about throwing a perfect spiral, but I think I just figured out something else." Theo blinked, confused. "What's that?" Ryan took a deep breath and smiled. "I think I'm falling for you." Theo's eyes widened. "What?" Ryan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know, kind of out of nowhere, but I can't help it. You're smart, you're funny, and I like being around you, more than I thought I would." Theo stood there for a moment, stunned. This was Ryan Andrews, the guy every girl in town wanted, the guy who could have had anyone. And he was standing there, telling Theo he liked him. After what felt like an eternity, Theo finally smiled, his face turning bright red. "Well, I think I like you too, Rocket." Ryan's heart did a little flip at the sound of the nickname. Yeah, Theo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not so bad yourself." And from that moment on, things changed. They weren't just quarterback and reporter anymore. They were something more. They were partners. The weeks flew by. Ryan continued to lead the Hornets to victory, and Theo was right there beside him, capturing every moment, every press conference, and every quirky conversation they shared. And as they sat together one evening, sharing pizza after a big win, Ryan looked at Theo and realized that for once, he didn't need a game plan to know what he wanted. He already had it. Theo, his nerdy, awkward, brilliant, and wonderful Theo. They made it work, football and physics, strength and brains, and in the end, it was a perfect game.